Howdy, and welcome to episode 121 of In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. Today I'm joined by Jen Pitino of Urban Chicken Podcast. She shares with us the pleasures of rubbing down chickens with silk scarves and all things urban chicken. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Jen, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. I know we did an episode together on your show, and now we get to have you on ours and share all your wonderful knowledge of chickens and find out what you have against rabbits. Come on, lady, what's that all about?
I don't dislike the rabbits. It's just they're too cute to really harvest. I don't think that I could harvest, little bunny foo-foo. So it's chickens. It's chickens for me.
I completely understand and identify with that, and Jason picks on me about that regularly, that I have a much easier time with the chickens than the rabbits. Of course, we do have a few rabbits that are named, and every time he says their name or I say their name, he just looks at me and shakes his head, and he's like, that's great. Now we can't get rid of these rabbits.
Oh, no. Once one of your birds or one of your rabbits has a name, it's over. They're getting to retire, on full rations.
Mm-hmm.
I've got chickens that like to, snuggle and ride in the hammock with me, and I'm like, ooh, you're never going to freezer camp. You're definitely staying with me.
Yeah. So let's back up in time a little bit. First, how'd you get into preparedness?
Well, I kind of came to preparedness in a roundabout sort of way, and this is really convoluted. But back when the movie Super Size Me came out, I saw it, and I don't know why, but it really resonated with me, and I just had this epiphany, like, oh my God, fast food restaurants don't give a damn about me. And then I kind of took that to, you know what, if they don't give, a damn about me, maybe just general food industry doesn't give a damn about me. And I just started to unravel the sweater that maybe a lot of things around me were set up not for the interest of their customers or not for the interest of the citizens, but really in our worst interest. And I started to really look around and was really dismayed by GMOs and like I said, food and food corporations. And that kind of came all at about the same time as the 2008 downturn in the economy and America taking on all this debt. I just had this wake-up call that things were not right and things were amiss, and to really wake up. And that's where I kind of got my first toe in the water with preparedness.
Mm-hmm. That's not that convoluted of a journey. I've heard some much more convoluted journeys, but I mean, it definitely makes sense. And I think there was definitely a large influx of people, as we all know, that came in around 2008 with the downturn of everything. And everybody finally realized, okay, the universe isn't perfect. I'm not necessarily always safe all the time. Maybe I should take a long, hard look at where my weaknesses are. And then I think they end up in one way or another in prep. And then, and then there's the tinfoil hatters like myself that have just always been nuts. But,
well, I guess I should step back. I mean, being a bit skeptical about government is definitely in my veins. I had a father who was a big John Birch Society member and sent me to John Birch Society summer camp. So when everybody else was going to Bible camp or, Girl Scout camp, I was going to John Birch Society camp and playing with Geiger meters and talking about the communists that were going to be coming into America. So, I certainly had at least some background in being wary and skeptical.
See, now, then it's not that convoluted. I mean, you had some sort of childhood basis in it. And so it was, in a lot of ways, kind of a natural coming back to things in a way for you, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yes, I would say yes. I wouldn't say it was a full-on homecoming because came a lot less paranoid of outside forces getting us, in America, a lot less of the commies are coming. And if you're of a certain age and if you're of a certain Cold War, certain age and you remember the Cold War, you definitely have a different perspective. My perspective suddenly went to, I was really skeptical of my own government and the decisions being made in country. So yeah, I mean, they're not that far off, but they are, it's a little bit slightly different focus.
Yeah, definitely. But just as a generality.
Sure.
Yeah, somebody and I were talking about that recently. I can't think of who we were talking about. Oh, it was James Gray and I were talking about the Cold War versus modern day, not boogeyman, but what kind of wakes people up and gets them going. So it's always interesting to hear how people got into prep, or for people that were into it in some way when they were young, and then later in life came back into it. So one of your preps was chickens, obviously. How did you get into chickens?
Well, I actually was already into prep before I got my chickens. And so I had been doing some food storage and thinking about water sources and heat sources if things really went sideways, and was already 2-3 years pretty neck deep in that. And I had been thinking about chickens for a long time, and I ended up at a 4th of July celebration in a little town outside of Boise where I live. And they had a chicken roundup competition. And essentially, chicken roundup is you pay a nominal fee and you go in the middle of a ring, and they set loose all these teenage chickens. And when they set off the bell, you try and chase down a chicken, and whatever chickens you can catch, you can keep. So my niece at the time, who was 4 years old at the time, she was entered into the children's division of this contest. And when you're 4 or 5 years old, the competition's pretty thick, chicken roundup. But, she was not able to catch a chicken and was very disappointed. And so my sister and I were like, well, what the hell? They have an adult division. And let's, put our $3 down and see what happens. And, and the competition as adults chasing down chicken is a lot thinner. And we both ended up catching chickens, which was really great at the time, because you first catch this chicken, you're like, yeah, great, I caught a chicken. And then you're like, oh my God, I caught a chicken. I don't have a coop. Hell, I don't even have a box. I don't have a box to get this chicken home. I do not want these chickens free ranging in the back of my Camry. What was I thinking? And really, it was just a steep learning curve after we caught the 2 first chickens, and we've been really into chickens since.
Mm-hmm. What were your biggest hurdles that you had to overcome besides, having to go out and get all this stuff to now care for a chicken?
Well, okay. So when we caught the chickens, it was 4th of July, and 4th of July in Boise, what a lot of people don't realize about Boise, Idaho, is it's a high plains desert, and it gets hotter than hell up here, like come July, August. I mean, we often have over 100-degree weather. And so, of course, the 4th of July, we catch the birds. It's 100 plus for like the next 3 weeks. And my sister and I were like, well, we looked into buying a chicken coop, off of Craigslist or at one of the feed stores. And we're like, oh my God, I'm not giving you that kind of money for a coop. And so, then we're at the library getting books and trying to figure it out. And so really one of the biggest hurdles was having these chickens living in a box in my guest bathroom, stinking up the place, squawking. And so this pressure's on, like, oh my God, we got to break out all of our Girl Scout skills. We're going to be building this coop. And then, of course, we try to be all green about it. So we're breaking down pallets and trying to figure it out. But yeah, we actually made, first a chicken tractor, which is a movable coop. And then later, about a month later, earlier in the fall, we made a more permanent coop and run. And we made it pretty much all out of recycled wood and different materials. So that was actually the hardest part, because we were spending every evening after work and all weekends to build these coops for these chickens. And I'm not gonna lie, that really sucked. So, but they're built, and the chickens seem to appreciate it. So that was probably the hardest part.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said you went from a chicken tractor to a permanent coop, and I've often heard of people going in the opposite direction. So why did you go? I guess first, let's for listeners that aren't that familiar with chickens, what is a chicken tractor?
So a chicken tractor is basically a very lightweight, movable coop. And the idea is that you can move it around the yard and the chicken can range on pasture in different parts of your yard. And that sounds great. And perhaps if we had built the chicken tractor in a way that was less cute and more functional, that would have been great. But we built a very cute chicken tractor with bright red, barn red paint. And it was very cute, but we had built it like an arc. So it's triangle shaped. And it is just heavy. It is just stupid heavy to try and pick this thing up and move it around. And so really then we were finding that we're not really moving the tractor around. And then having built it in a triangle shape, which we hadn't really thought about, we put the roofs up in the top part of the triangle. And with the pitch of the roof, we were finding that the chickens felt really crowded and were pretty unhappy up there. So yeah, the permanent coop that just sits in one place, it's a nice big rectangle. We went with a nice box shape after that, keep it simple. So if we had built the tractor differently, and I always tell people now to build their tractors, in a square shape, you get more bang for your buck. To build it with better wheels and really think about weight. Maybe if it had better functionality, they would have stayed in there, but it's a weird trade-off because with a tractor too, because of the weight issue, it's not particularly insulated. And where it can get really hot in Idaho, you turn around and we got sub-zero temperatures come winter. And so you need to think about keeping the chickens warm, and a tractor isn't always a really good option for that.
Oh yeah, I never thought of that before.
So yes, we got to build 2 chicken homes in 2 months.
Man, this is some spoiled chickens. I got a winter home and a summer home and a mobile home, and
well, they just had chicken spa day yesterday, so we
what is chicken spa day?
So we did have chicken spa day. So my sister and I are taking our chicken abilities to the next level, and we've entered, I want to say 10 chickens into the Western Idaho Fair to compete. And you gotta bathe up your chickens. I mean, there's a lot that goes into prepping up your chickens for competition. So yeah, they got the 3-bucket bath system, and so they got bathed, and they got with a toothbrush scrubbing down their legs and their feet and oiling their feet and emery boarding their nails. No, it was a full chicken spa day. But
wow, that is so. I gotta know, how did the chickens respond to this, especially the 3 buckets?
I'm going to say chickens do not particularly love spa day. And because generally chickens don't smell that bad. Yeah, but wet chicken does not smell good. I mean, it's not quite as bad as wet dog, but it has a certain stink to it that's not real pleasant. And of course, they're flapping and splashing water all over you. So we were completely wet, bathing 10 chickens yesterday. So yeah, special chicken spa day.
That's interesting. I don't see myself or Jason ever doing that for our chickens, but yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And and I think you and I talked about that before, that you were getting involved or had been very involved in showing chickens. What is the appeal for doing that? I've never really gotten into the showing of animals. I was just curious, what is the appeal for doing that?
Now, I agree. When I first got my chickens, I was not that interested in showing chickens, but again, the niece who was at the chicken roundup, she's joined 4-H, and so she shows chickens as a child. And my sister and I have come into some higher quality chickens and are thinking about trying to start basically a hatching egg business. And so we really want to test the quality of our stock. What do we really have here before we start selling stock? I don't know that I would really get into the chicken showing circuit myself. It's actually really expensive and time consuming, kind of like showing dogs. And there's and there's all these tricks to it. So, I find myself watching these, reading these articles or watching YouTube videos. Like, for example, did you know that when you're showing chickens, it's really great to have a 100% silk scarf so you can rub them down, full body rub them down with the silk scarf? Because I know. Because chickens like full silk, I don't want a polyester bun. But no, the silk actually zippers up their feathers and makes their feathers look really nice and neat and shiny. So I trolled the local thrift shops and found myself a 100% silk scarf for the birds. And yeah. So I don't know that I would say that I'm going to get really heavily into showing chickens, but like I said, we're doing it really for practical reasons right now to kind of get some professional opinions on the quality of our stock.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I get that. I'm still laughing at the rubbing them down with a silk scarf.
Oh, well, yes, and that's the part of Chicken Spa Day they kind of like, oh, that's kind of nice. I'm like, all right,
I mean, who wouldn't like that?
I'm gonna give you the silk scarf treatment. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, this episode just took a strange turn. Rubbing our chickens next on In the Rabbit Hole. But anyway. Okay, so that's interesting. What I guess as far as, one of the things that's always kind of driven me nuts, how big of an impact does the feed you give your chickens actually have on the quality of the meat? I mean, granted, good inputs in, good inputs out, or garbage in, garbage out, but
right.
With the eggs and everything else, because I know one of the things we noticed was we had some Australorps, and the first season we had them, I'd say the first 6 months of their egg production, their eggs weren't that great, but then we were still feeding them the same thing, but oddly, like about after the first 6 months, all of a sudden their eggs got a lot better, and it was just Jason or I really. We commented on it and commented on how unusual it was, and also commented on when we would change the feed, or I should say when Jason would randomly change the feed, mm-hmm. we would notice a difference. But in your opinion, what effect does it have, or what impact does it have?
Well, I think it does have some impact because definitely there's a lot of disparate levels of quality in the feed. And I would tell you, I kind of feed them something sort of in the middle. I feed them I feed them an organic on-the-shelf pellet that I like. But I think what really makes the difference for the birds, maybe more than the feed, is I find that the chickens are highly sensitive to their surroundings and how they feel. And I've noticed when our birds are too hot or our birds are too cold, or if our birds are stressed, it affects their egg production. It affects the yolks. It affects the eggs altogether. I would say that in my observation, that I really think that their eggs got better when they were allowed to roam around the yard free. So they're getting a mix of greens, out of the grass. They're eating dandelions and grass and plants and bugs. And when they were able to run around the yard and sort of get as much of that as they wanted and as much feed as they wanted, I found that they were the happiest and that the eggs are the best at those times. So I put some stock into what's also being added to their diets, the treats or the availability to pasture and bugs and roaming around, just also for their quality of life and happiness and stress levels.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Have you ever had it where all of a sudden out of the blue, the yolks, the membrane on the yolks themselves becomes very thin, and it's almost like if you try to crack it in a pan, like they just run. They seem to never hold together. We keep experiencing that, and we can't figure out what it is. And it seems to ebb and flow. And that's kind of the weird thing. Like the rabbits for us, the rabbits are pretty consistent as far as the way they behave and everything else. But the chickens I found have a bigger variance in their behavior and the eggs and everything else going on. They're they seem to be a lot more sensitive in a lot of ways to what's going on around them. They're sensitive mm-hmm. birds.
And I was just going to say, you've intrigued me, these really runny eggs. So I'm not going to lie. I just Googled it while we were talking. And I'm on the Backyard Chicken Forum. And it sounds like that a lot of people are responding that could be actually related to heat. And you guys being down in Texas, I would think it might get, pretty freaking hot in your coops down there. Yeah.
I mean, the ambient air temperature on any given summer day can get as high as 115 plus 80% humidity. So that would make sense. Yeah, because the chickens themselves, other than going in to lay eggs, they almost never hang out in their own coop except to sleep at night or lay eggs.
So stepping back, you said you noticed a difference in your eggs when you guys changed feeds. Do you know what feeds were you going from?
Oh, the biggest difference was what was it he was doing? I'm not picking on him because at the time we were really new to it and we had no idea what we were doing. But I sent him out to get chicken feed. He was supposed to do it early in the day and he kind of farted around. I don't know what he was doing. And so he's like, I'm really sorry, man. I couldn't make it to the feed store on time. So I went by Walmart and got this 50-pound sack of bird seed, like you put in a bird feeder. And I was like, all right, well, I don't want the chickens to go hungry, so we'll just give them that. And they went crazy for it. But then, of course, we learned a hard lesson with that all of a sudden egg production just stopped. And first we thought it was that they were molting, and then that turned out to be just we didn't have enough hens for our amorous rooster. And then we finally figured out, oh, okay, you can't do that to their feed. You can't feed them bird seed. They like it, but it screws with their egg production. And then about 6 months later, we went through a similar thing, except that time he went to the feed. So I was like, yeah, go get some feed. And he goes and he gets feed, and he's like, they were out of feed. All they had was scratch. And I was like, okay, don't you think we're going to have a repeat of the bird seed? And he's like, no, it'll be fine. And I was like, yeah, you're right. It'll probably be fine. Let's just give him that. And again, they were like, oh, this is amazing. Thank you. We're having a very handy time. And then egg production just stops.
Well, yes, because what most people probably don't know is in regular bird feed, it's not just grains and seeds. It actually has a very calculated amount of, usually it's like blood meal or bone meal. So that it's really high in calcium and magnesium and protein. So even a layers feed will have, generally speaking, I think a layers feed is at least 18% protein. And so if you're just feeding them scratch, yeah, they're not getting any of that. And if it is summer and they're molting and they're layers, it takes so much protein out of their body to actually produce the new feathers, all the new pin feathers that they're going to be growing, that usually that's why egg production just stops anyways. But even if they're kind of, you know how chickens kind of sometimes like half molt and think about it and then finish the molt later, they are using up so much protein in their body to deal with that if you're not giving them a feed that has that high protein balance to it, yeah, I'm not surprised your egg production just came to a grinding halt.
Yeah, and conversely, we also noticed a giant bump in egg production after each time we cull the rabbits, because, well, the chickens apparently really liked the scraps that we were throwing away, and that was just nothing but protein. So that was kind of interesting to watch, too.
Well, that's the thing that kind of grosses people out, but
yeah, it wasn't pretty, but it worked. It was pretty. One, it was interesting to see how interested in the rabbit scraps the chickens actually were. And then there was a whole big joke about zombie chickens attacking the rabbits in the middle of the night once they tasted bunny flesh. But we get a little loopy on the farm sometimes. It's hot out there.
It is hot out there.
Yes. But yeah, it was interesting to see how they would just scarf it down, and a little disturbing. And it was also just something like, okay. And that's kind of, since our farm has a very public area, and a lot of the neighbors that have moved in are younger yuppie neighbors that have kids, and so we always have to be careful anytime we're culling, because they treat our farm like it's a petting zoo, and or like just a zoo, and they come up and they're looking in it, which is cool, except on slaughter day, and you're like, yeah, lady, get your kid out of here. This is like Dexter going on over here.
It's the living dead over here, so you probably not, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is not pretty. You don't want to show your child this, probably.
Well, and even with my friends, it always shocks people when you explain to individuals that chickens are not vegetarians. Chickens, if you let them, they would happily just feed on steak all day. I mean, they're little carnivores. I mean, they're baby dinosaurs, and so it doesn't surprise me that your egg production went up, and because it does. It takes a tremendous amount of protein and calcium for them to be able to produce their eggs. So, of course, they're going to gravitate naturally to that. So.
Now, do you mix in extra like oyster shell and stuff like that with yours? Because we've toyed with that back and forth of whether or not we should even be doing that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I absolutely put oyster shell in, and for a while I tried to do the really earthy thing where you take when you cook their eggs, you keep their eggshells, and then you have to bake them and grind them up so they don't recognize them as their own eggshells. And I gave up on that. That's just too much work for me. I got too many other things going. I'm like, eat the oyster shell. But
Yeah.
yeah, and they will actually eat a lot of oyster shell. So yeah, if you're not giving them the oyster shell, I would definitely suggest it. I mean, you can buy a big 20-pound bag for not a whole lot, next to nothing.
Yeah. We do. I was doing the before our great chicken massacre that happened. I was saving all of the eggshells that I had, and I was just crushing them up. I wasn't baking them or anything, which you'll have to tell me what that's all about in a second. I was just crushing them up and feeding them straight eggshell. But apparently, I was the only one that thought that was an okay thing to do in the mornings, because I'd asked my mother and father to do it, and I'd asked Jason to do it, and Jason, who can't remember to bring the egg cartons back to begin with, but my mom and dad were like, "Yeah, no, we're not doing that. I tell you what, we'll buy you some oyster shell. Quit messing around with the shells." So now,
Yeah,
what is the baking of the eggshells about? Is that just to make them more brittle, or?
I think it's to make them more brittle, and I think it's also to, you're not going to have any leftover egg goo on there that they might be like, yummy, it's cream filled, and so I think it's just part of the making sure they're clean, they're healthy, they don't have anything rotting on them, they don't have anything identifiable about them as eggs, but it's a lot of work. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess it's not that much work. It's just when you got a lot of irons in the fire, it seems like one more thing that
Yeah.
oyster shells could answer easily.
Yeah. $5 worth of oyster shell at the feed store while you're getting feed, and just give it off to the chickens. So now,
Yeah.
as far as what kind of breeds have you gotten into, and what breeds have you played with, I guess?
Okay. So when I was at the chicken roundup, I ended up my first chicken, who I named Frida Kahlo chicken, is a black sex link.
Mm.
And so she's kind of she's not considered a very special bird. She's not an APA, an American Poultry Association recognized bird, but she's a hybrid. And a sex link is a hybrid in that they crossbreed two different types of breeds of chicken. And in the first generation of offspring, you can tell immediately the sex of the day old chicks based on their colors.
Mm.
But it only works for the first generation. So after that, it won't work. It doesn't work for the subsequent generations. But, that's why feed stores like sex links, because they are absolutely sexable. You can tell what the chick sexes are.
Mm-hmm.
And they're a hybrid breed that are really designed to be great egg layers. And then I ended up buying her a couple friends. Actually, I bought her 3 friends. And so I had bought a silver lace Wyandotte. I bought a black silky. And I also bought her an Americana, all as friends. And of course, at the feed store, these birds that are supposedly sexed, the silver lace Wyandotte and the silky were both boys.
Mm.
So Sally and Sylvia were not Sally and Sylvia. And so I got them new homes. They didn't end up having to go to freezer camp. And then, I had the Americana. And the sad thing about keeping animals, which is, it's sad, but I think it's a useful learning lesson too, is that my Americana just up and died. And I came out in the coop one day and she was dead underneath her, their little ladder. And as best as I can figure it, it looks like she may have had some freak accident and fallen and broken her neck, but I'm not really sure. And it was really sad. But I think it's hard, but it's a good learning lesson that you're going to lose animals. You're going to lose animals, even when you give them your best efforts. And so I bought Frida some new friends because it was just Frida. And I have to say, when she was alone, it became really clear that chickens are very social animals, because she just went manic. She actually started crowing like a rooster.
Oh,
And I
that's
was like,
strange.
what is this about? And so she got a lot happier when I bought her 2 more hen friends. And so I now have, with Frida, I have a Cuckoo Moran, and I also have a Welsummer. They're both heritage breeds, and they both lay really dark eggs. And so those 3 are in the coop. But as I mentioned, I had come into quite a few really nice chickens. And so at my house, I also have in the tractor, because they're not quite big enough, I have some blue Bresses. Blue Bresses are actually a specialty breed out of France, and they're recognizable because they have actually blue legs. Their legs and feet are blue. And they're considered to be the best eating bird in the world. And so when the French actually sell them, they actually sell their chicken carcasses with the blue legs on so that you can verify it's really a breast.
Oh, wow.
And so yeah, they're gorgeous little birds, and they're really clever and curious. And so, but aside from them, I co-own with my sister some other specialty breeds. We have some Jubilee Orpingtons, and they are a dual purpose bird. So they're both a good layer, and they're a big hardy meat bird. And they're really pretty. They're speckly. So we have a bunch of those. We have some leg bars and ice bars, which are specialty breeds out of Europe. And they're special because they're auto-sexing breeds. And the auto-sexing breeds were developed by a monk. And I hate to say it, I can't remember the monk's name other than he was a monk. He actually genetically bred and created these breeds that when they are born, the chicks are born, there's a distinguishing mark on the sexes. So again, you can sex the day old chicks. Absolutely.
Oh, neat.
And so, and that actually will carry on throughout the generations as long as you keep the breed pure. So we have the ice bars, the leg bars, and we also have some black copper morans, and we have some solitaires, which they are just crazy birds. Yeah, they're just naughty birds. So those are probably going to go. They're really awful, actually.
What makes for a naughty bird? I mean, I think I've been called a naughty bird a few times, but I'm curious, in the world of chickens, what constitutes a naughty bird?
Well, the naughty birds, they're never getting the silk scarf treatment. But really, okay, first of all, and you can probably, attest to this. There's like some birds that just have a nice look about them.
Mm-hmm.
These birds just look mean. They just look like little jerks. And, and so they just look mean. And she's just really flighty. And if I even speak to them, they start freaking out and flapping and, and having to chase them down. They're just flighty, mean looking little jerks. So, and the one last breed that we also have is Bielefelders. And they're, again, another specialty breed out of Germany. So we've got some really cool breeds that we're now figuring out, like, okay, we really can't hatch out 8 varieties of chickens in my sister's, urban backyard. So we're trying to figure out what are the couple breeds we're really going to keep and focus on, and what are we going to let go. And so that's why we have 10 chickens in the fair. So
I gotcha. Yeah, I was going to say that makes more sense, because I was thinking, you were telling me all the different breeds. I was like, wow, that's going to start being real tricky real quick, trying to hatch these things out. And as far as a rooster goes, how are you, I guess at that point, just going to focus on 1 or 2 roosters or something? Or, because I mean, that was the other thing that I was thinking. I was like, man, for all these chickens, they're going to have that rooster for each one of these chickens too.
Right. And so that is really the difficult part is we really realistically we can only keep maybe 1 or 2 roosters.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can only really breed out a couple breeds. We're actually looking really hard at, which breeds make the most sense, which roosters have more purposes. So, for example, one of the ways we're thinking about doing it is if we keep the black copper Moran roosters, we could crossbreed them with the leg bars, and leg bars traditionally lay a blue egg. And we could cross them with the ice bars that lay a green egg. And if we cross them, we could make olive egger chicks. And so that would be kind of cool. In addition to, breeding them with their own black copper pullets or hens. But then again, we have all these Jubilee Orpingtons, and they are pretty hardy, and we have a lot of them. So we haven't made the tough decisions of which birds are going to stay and which birds are going to go. And I have to say, we've been trying really hard experimenting with chicken call, these rooster callers. I don't know if you've heard about this. Have you heard of her? So there's actually, if you look it up on the web, there's all these people that say that you can take essentially 2-inch wide band of Velcro and put it on your rooster's neck. And you can put it on tight enough where they can breathe, they can eat, but they can't really puff out their neck like a bullfrog, because they kind of do that when they crow.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds great. And in fact, there's a new company called No Crow Rooster Collars that's pretty new out of Utah that, manufactures these rooster collars. And I'm actually trying to work out a deal to test some of some of their products. But so far, much to our disappointment, this, just taking the 2-inch bands of Velcro around the rooster necks, we're not having a lot of success with it because, you put it on and, these little roosters are crowing it up anyways. And so my sister tried to tighten it down and we can't seem to find the fine line between they'll shut up and their combs are turning blue and they're laying down listless, like, okay, that wasn't what we were shooting for. You are quiet, but
rooster asphyxia.
Yeah, the rooster asphyxia is not asphyxiation is not really what we're shooting for. And so we're trying really hard because we would like to keep them. And I will tell you, this is a really controversial, topic in the chicken world because chicken purists will tell you that's awful and that's cruel and roosters have got to be roosters and you don't hem them in. But when you live in a city, it just can't be a rooster free for all. And so we'd like to keep them and we'd like to treat them well, but we've really got to figure out something to make them shut up. And and they don't. So we're still working on that.
Mm-hmm. I'll be interested to hear how your experiment with that goes. Fortunately, we've never had a problem with it, which was surprising because it's at a few points in the last couple of years we've had, after we've done like a big breeding, we've had four or five roosters at a time that have gotten to the point where they've started crowing, plus our main rooster that was already crowing, and shockingly, no one ever complained about it. But yeah, I'll be interested to see how that goes, and curious what the outcome is of that. And that brings up a big interesting point as far as like in the city. And I know in a lot of ways, the area that Jason and I have to work in for our farm, it's kind of an isolated situation. It was an industrial warehouse area before townhouses and stuff started getting built around it. And these are people that were already kind of acknowledging that they were going to be urban pioneers to begin with. So the fact that they're, living next door to a bunch of chickens and roosters and rabbits isn't, I guess, that big of a deal to them. But what challenges have you run into with your urban farm or your urban chicken farm?
Well, I do actually live in downtown Boise. I'm probably 4 or 5 blocks off of what's considered part of the downtown core. And I've been really blessed in that my neighbors have thought the chickens are very cute and intriguing. But I mean, let's face it, chickens can be little jerks. And I don't know, what ruffles their feathers, and even hens can get themselves worked up and they're squawking and fighting and making a ton of noise. And I just cringe that, oh my God, is this bugging one of the neighbors? And so for me, I've been really blessed. But I have friends, and I have, especially online and different listeners of mine who have not been that blessed and have been actually just harangued by neighbors about how dare your chicken make any noise. And I think that's really an interesting double standard when you look at the urban context for having chickens. Now, set aside roosters. Roosters are their own thing, but just having hens is that people will get themselves so just nutted up about their neighbor having a handful of hens in their backyard and, oh my God, what it's going to do to the neighborhood house values. And yet nobody seems to blink twice about anybody's dog that just barks and howls on end. And so for me, I have to say, honestly, I've just been really lucky. It's been a really good fit, and I haven't really had any troubles that way.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm kind of disappointing,
You're totally a letdown here, Jen. I was expecting.
You want to hear trials and tribulations.
I do. Wait, shotguns should have been involved in some sort of family feud or something.
Oh yeah, well, we do have on the books here in Boise. Your dog gets in my yard is molesting my livestock, I can drop that dog. So people beware. So no, I actually have been very blessed. It's been and I'm very blessed in that I live in a city that is really pro chicken. And so, I read about other cities and they just have these ridiculous, and I listen to your show, and I think you and I are very like-minded because I tend to be a bit libertarian. I really hate government micromanaging what doesn't need to be managed. And so I read up about these other cities where, they have all these rules, like your chicken coop can't be, any closer than 100 feet from the nearest inhabited dwellings front door, and you have to pay, $75 or, any kind of fee to register your chicken coop with the city clerk's office, and they need to come and actually inspect your coop. And I'm
God.
Going, I know, I'm like, they're freaking chickens, I mean, honestly, I could put them in a dog igloo and they'd be happy or happy enough. And it really troubles me where we've gotten in America, where we are so worried and so concerned with trying to control the behavior of our neighbors, in my opinion, to try and preserve some sort of perceived lifestyle. Like, I live in this kind of neighborhood, and in my lifestyle, my neighbors don't have chickens. But it seems as an American society, have focused a lot on trying to control others' behaviors to match what we think would be most polite society.
Yeah, and often in truly bizarre ways, or actually it's almost always in really bizarre ways. What do I care? What should my neighbor care what I do in my home? Aside from deciding one night I want to become the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something, okay, fine. Yeah, that's, infringing on someone else's liberty and making a lot of ruckus. But besides that, yeah, I'm there with you. That kind of stuff drives me nuts. I know Houston actually does have that 100-foot, what is it? It has to be the coop has to be 100 feet from any opening in the dwelling, not just the door. It has to be 100 feet from any windows or anything like that, which...
It's ridiculous. It's impossible unless you owned like an acre.
Exactly. And there's no permitting, but now you do get into permitting, because I know Jason and I wanted to get into pygmy goats. And we found out like the rules around that were really silly. It was like a $500 permit because it was a milking animal. I don't... And like animal control came out one time to take a look at what we were doing, and he started explaining to me the $500 permit. He's like, well, we've got to test the animal for this and that. And I'm like, what are you testing for? And what do you think my animal's going to catch or give away to all the other goats around me? And he was like, yeah, he's like, I'm not telling you it makes a damn bit of sense. I'm just telling you what they say it's for. And then the other thing was you could only have one.
You could only have one. You can't have just one goat.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, what is the point of one goat? I was like, at that point, it's a pet.
Well, and goats are like chickens. Goats want friends.
Yeah.
Chickens, animals want friends. We all want friends.
We all want friends. And I think the chickens might get a little upset if the goat's trying to, roll up on them and be like, hey, can I hang out with you guys? Like, stupid goat again.
Well, no, chickens are mean. They run in gangs, because I've seen my chickens.
That's true.
Do. They run in gangs, and my poor cat just gets bullied by my chickens.
I could see that. I've seen every once in a while, and it's always very bizarre when it happens, but every once in a while, one of our rabbits will find a way to get out of its cage, which is not a good thing, because all of them are at least at the bottom of their cages are about 3.5 feet off the ground. So these rabbits go for a little swan dive, and I'm always a little surprised that none of them have broken their legs or anything. And it's usually Jason or I have forgotten to latch their cage. But every time that happens, I find the rabbit in a corner somewhere, like it was in the prison yard and had just been beat up, and the chickens are like randomly running over there and taking a peck at the rabbit, and the rabbit's like, leave me alone. I just fell out of my cage. I'm not really here. Don't ignore me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to finish one thought, my one little rant about over-regulating chickens and goats and these different animals is, it seems like a lot of cities or a lot of these different government entities are so worked up, and they want to anticipate any problems ahead of time. So therefore we're going to have the 100-foot rule, or we're going to have that we need to make, make you have a permit so we can inspect your coop to make sure it's inhabitable. And they never, there's never a stepping back and using logic like, why would I want to put my chickens in a coop that would kill them? I want to raise chickens, and never thinking about there's already, I would say virtually in all, I would go out there and say in all jurisdictions, there's going to be rules and laws on the books about public nuisance. If I'm basically trying to start a pig farm next to you, I am going to squarely fall inside the nuisance laws. And quite frankly, I think your backyard chickens, if you really made them a problem, would fall into the nuisance laws. And yet it seems, again, like as an American society, we're so worried about we have to over-regulate, to anticipate all problems and never just step back and look at the big picture. So it's frustrating. But I will say, I really am blessed. I live in a city that's very progressive in that way and is very pro-chickens, pro-backyard bees, and so forth. So
that's cool. That's very cool. To wind you up a little bit more, I was going to, because I know you've been keeping up with the Right to Farm Act and all that other stuff that was going on with it, and I haven't been keeping up with it very well. And what's going on with all that? I heard, I was trying to catch your show one day, and I did hear something about that in there, that they were repealing it or doing something.
Well, okay. So Michigan used to have probably the most progressive backyard farming laws on the books in all of America. And it came out of the 80s, and it was called the Right to Farm Act. And from what I understand is basically when there was all this flight out of Detroit into these newly developing suburb areas, that these new suburbs were basically abutting up to traditional family farms. And so the yuppies move out of the city, and now they move to the so-called nuisance. There's animals, there's farms, and now they're unhappy that there's animals and farms living near them.
Shocking.
I know, shocking. Like, what? These goats and chickens next to me. It's so offensive. And so there was a large lobbyist group out of DC that kind of funded it, but this group actually funded and sponsored basically the writing of this, what was called the Right to Farm Act in Michigan. And basically it said that anybody that was farming in their backyard and on their property had a right to do so long as they were actually farming for profit. And so it really opened up the doors for small scale backyard producers. And so there was a number of people that actually would raise chickens and sell the eggs at the farmers markets, keep backyard bees, grow vegetables, and again, sell to local restaurants and farmers markets. And in fact, the statistics on Michigan's number of farmers markets and really farm fresh food available, I believe, was only second to like California. I mean, it was really impressive. What happened was, and again, I am a bit of a cynic because I will tell you, I think Monsanto may be the antichrist of all corporations, but there is some speculation that large agribusiness didn't really want to compete with the growing local farm movement, the local, eat organic. And so the Right to Farm Act was tweaked to not protect anymore these little teeny producers, these little teeny backyard producers. And so all these backyard chicken keepers and backyard beekeepers suddenly found themselves not protected anymore by the Right to Farm Act and falling under all these city codes. And so essentially they're kind of in the same boat as the rest of America, but it's a shame and it's a real loss because it seemed to have been working for a very long time and was really a progressive movement in their state that they've stepped back from.
The one time they decide to take some stuff away.
Yeah.
Yeah. That seems like even if they take something away, it's only so that they can meddle with things more, it seems.
The irony is it appears, and again, I'm an outsider, so this is kind of my not as an expert on this subject, and certainly not being in Michigan, but from my read and take on it, it seemed like the law kind of came in to benefit big farms, and it just happened to benefit everybody. And now that big farms feel like they're competing with the small guys, the backyard producers, big farm, big industry, farm agra is come back to say no. So, of course, we wouldn't want to keep the playing field even. No.
Oh, I don't want to do that.
We wouldn't want a free market. No.
No. Highly overrated. Highly overrated.
I want it regulated.
Well, too funny. So if somebody was going to get into chickens tomorrow, what advice would you give?
Okay, this is going to sound hackneyed because everybody says this, but everybody will tell you, check to see what the laws are in your area. And I hate to, say the same thing that everybody says, but it's worth reminding people because not all jurisdictions, not all cities' points of view on chickens are the same. I mean, some cities actually have rules that are so ridiculous that you have to go around and get written permission from your neighbors to be able to have birds on your own property, which to me is like the antithesis of the American spirit. I have to, mother, may I please, beg my neighbors to use my private property how I want. So, so I would caution people to first know what the rules are in their neighborhood, because there's a lot of very sad stories about people who get chickens, get attached to their chickens, are doing great with their chickens. And then it's that one jerky turkey neighbor that finds out and has to put themselves in the middle of everybody else's business that's going to report them. So I would check on that first. And then my other piece of advice would be, unlike how I did it, I would really set yourself up with the coop first. Get the coop before you get the birds. It's, and I know that sounds silly, but I think a lot of people sometimes kind of rush into that too. And
yeah.
And I would actually encourage people to think about building their own coops, because what your needs are going to be a little specialized. And when you go to the feed stores and you buy those $300 coops, they're really not great. And they really don't give the birds the floor space they need. And if people will just take the time and build something, they're going to get a much nicer, setup for their home, their needs, and their birds. Quite frankly, if my sister and I can buy a $25 table saw off of Craigslist to make it happen, anybody can make it happen. So it is doable to build your own coop, and it's worth taking time and thinking about it. But I would also say that people sometimes get bogged down in this never-ending planning, thinking about it. At some point, you just got to jump off and do it.
Yeah.
And chickens are hardy. You'd be surprised. Chickens are hardy, and they can take a little bit of a learning curve on our part as chicken owners.
Yeah, we found that to be the case quite often. That's interesting that you brought up about building your own coop. And also the story you were talking about as far as like looking on Craigslist for these people that make, and some of them do. It's amazing how expensive those coops on Craigslist can get. I mean, hey, if those guys can get those kind of dollars for those coops, more power to them. I'm not knocking them for it. I was just like, wow, yeah, I'm not spending that kind of money on a chicken coop. But one of the things I came across a while back was there's a couple of different websites out there that sell chicken coop plans. Are those worthwhile, or is it just easier just to get on, or are you better off just getting on a forum and saying, hey, what have you guys found to be the best chicken coop design and dimensions and stuff like that?
Well, I have never bought any plans from some of the online plans chicken coop guys. I will say that I think that before you buy any plans, you really need to think about design. And a lot of the plans are for arcs, which are kind of like that triangle chicken tractor that I built. And I think that people will find that though an arc looks really cute, I question its functionality if you were really going to move it around a yard. And I also question how many chickens you could really comfortably keep in it. I know that a lot of them say that, oh yeah, you can keep a half dozen chickens in there. But realistically, when they have that little head space and, they're living in kind of the top third of the triangle of the arc, it gets really tight for birds. And so I think really some of those plans, even though they say they're rated for 6 birds, realistically, they're more rated for like 2 or 3. So I would always tell you, and I would tell your audience that if you're going to build a coop, I think a square design is better. I really think it gives the most room and headspace for the birds for the effort and space, the footprint that's going to be taken up in your yard.
Mm-hmm. So that's awesome information. Now tell us about your show. What got you started and said, you know what? I want to do a whole show about chickens.
Okay, so, how can I put this delicately? This is kind of delicate. I work in a job where there's certain parts of the job that's more a little bit data heavy that I can listen to podcasts. And so when I caught Frida the chicken at the chicken roundup, I thought to myself, well, there's got to be a podcast about chickens. And indeed, there was another podcast about chickens. And I really just could not get into this other show. I tried and I tried, but it was just so much babbling and so many ads and front loaded, so that the first 20 minutes of the show was babbling and ads that I never could get to the meat of the show, that I sat there and thought, okay, it can't be just me that is not connecting with this other podcast. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to learn this stuff anyways, why not share it? And so I had just gotten my first home laptop a couple of years earlier, and I was like, well, let's see what this laptop thing can really do. And so I watched a lot of YouTube videos, the amazing benefits of YouTube videos, and built my own website. And I apologize because it kind of looks like I built my own website, and started my own show, trying to answer questions that I thought were interesting to me, and to try and put it in a format that I try to front load as much information and to cut to the chase and give people information and not have them have to sit through a lot of fluff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did. It started a year ago, and I've been pleased. It seems that the show is doing pretty well and seems to be resonating with people. And I'm very blessed that people find it interesting and, and listen and let me know and write me questions to answer on the show. And I'm really happy with it. It's been a kind of an adventure, on par with the chickens themselves, to learn how to do all this. I mean, when you started the podcast, it's kind of the same thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, we had no idea what we were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still don't know what I'm doing, but yeah, no, especially when you get started, you're just like, oh my God, is anybody going to listen to this? And what am I doing? And, you obsess over microphones and other stupid things, or at least I do. But I have a bit of an addictive personality to begin with and tend to obsess over really things that I shouldn't. The learning curve you start off with is huge. And it's fun, but I think there's also that anxiety when you start off like, oh my God, I'm going to sound like an idiot. And I've had a lot of people since ask me about, I want to do a podcast and everything, but I'm so scared I'm going to sound like an idiot. And I was telling them, like, let me tell you something I realized shortly after we started ours, at least for the first few episodes. I was like, it doesn't matter. Nobody's listening. Say whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Get it all out of your system because nobody's listening. You will not have any fans besides your mother or whoever. And actually, my mother has never even listened to the show because I don't think she can figure out how podcasts work. But
neither can my dad. I've had this show and I'm like, Dad, have you listened to the show? He's like, oh, no, I saw your website once. So
yeah, no, neither my mom nor my dad have ever listened to the show. I bet my brother listens to the show every now and then, which is always kind of cool to hear. I'm like, haven't you had enough of me after almost 40 years anyway? Why are you listening to the show? But anyway, yeah, it's a big learning curve, and it's that initial hump and getting over it and getting over yourself enough and I think it's the thing that no one ever realizes when you get started, that it's like no one's listening. So it doesn't matter what you sound like. And and I've had other people say, well, their shows will be there for forever and I'll sound like an idiot. And it's like, yeah, and people will get it. It was your first episode. You didn't know what you were doing, and you babbled on. And I think, we've been doing this for a while, and I still have days where I babble on about who knows what. And, a lot of that ends up on the cutting room floor afterwards. But it's still, yeah. But it's fun and it's neat, and the interaction is neat. So, and I'm glad to see you started yours. That's cool. And it's always funny and I think that's so typical of anything that ends up in the marketplace. Somebody either sees, hey, somebody's doing it, but I don't like the way they're doing it, so I'm going to go try it over here. And then you end up with a really neat product, or you end up with an ecosystem where there's choices and competition. circling back for a second to the free market thing and everything like that. So yeah, it's really neat.
Well, I am a firm believer that we shouldn't be afraid of other people entering our area of blogging or our area of podcasting or any area that we're really heavily involved in.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think when there's more competition or there's more voices out there, all you're doing is raising the quality of all the ships. You are adding more knowledge out there, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think we need to be worried about that or because I have friends that ask me, like, are you worried that somebody else is going to come enter, the chicken podcasting world? And I'm like, well, they do.
Mm-hmm.
And with podcasting and kind of answering like what your friend had said, I'm going to sound stupid. I don't think you sound stupid as long as you are honest, as long as you're authentic. People connect with individuals when they're being themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And, and the harsh part about blogging or even podcasting is it's like real life, it's like your daily life. Not everybody's going to resonate with you as an individual, and that's okay. And that's also why I think it's okay for there to be other podcasts that come into the same little slice of niche genre that you're in, is that maybe, my podcast isn't for some people that try and listen to me, maybe the other guys is, or maybe this, if there's a third party, maybe it's them. And that's okay. Because especially in the chicken world, you think about the chicken blogging world, and I read some of the other chicken blogs. There's sort of more of a Martha Stewart, country craft, sweet photo memes with chicks and flowers out there, and
people rubbing their chickens with silk scarves.
I think, I don't know if a lot of people do that, but it's just me. But no. But generally, a lot of the people in chicken blogging have that kind of tenor to them, and I appreciate that, and I think there's a lot of value in that. But that's not me. I'm a little bit more direct, and I'm a little more. I don't know. I think I'm just a bit too sarcastic for that, and so I'm kind of the sarcastic chicken lady. I don't know. So you're probably never going to see a lot of country craft ideas out of me, and I don't toll paint for free time. In my free time for fun, but that's okay. I'm too busy, rubbing down my chickens with silk scarves because I like it.
Hey. We won't judge you for rubbing down your chickens with silk scarves. We are an all-encompassing kind of rabbit hole around here. Whatever kind of weird chicken silk scarf things you're into, that's cool. But so now yours is called the Urban Chicken Podcast. Is your focus primarily around chickens in the city that are sarcastic, or what? What do you got going on with that?
Yeah, real snarky city chickens.
Very, very, very hipster-esque kind of chickens.
Exactly. They have their handlebar mustaches and their fixed gear bikes. No. Well, yes and no. When I started the podcast, I really was thinking of people like in my own situation. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit egocentric. I really started a podcast to suit me and hoped other people would find it interesting too. So a lot of it does talk about city-specific situations, but I found that a lot of my listeners actually do have acreage and find that the topics are applicable even to them. So I wouldn't say that the show only applies to if you can only have 3 chickens and you live in the middle of downtown. I try to keep it pretty broad.
Mm-hmm. So that's pretty neat. So have you kind of veered away from the urban aspect and it has just become more of a broad, like snarky chicken show, or?
I would say, yeah. I would say it's pretty much a pretty broad chicken show. I don't really tailor it down to just people living in an urban situation. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty broad, and that the topics are applicable to anybody with an interest in keeping chickens as kind of a hobby or a backyard passion. It's funny. I think about when I've been on your website. I actually had listened to you guys when I first really started prepping. And what I really liked about your website and talking about survivalism and prepping was this idea that, you didn't really want to go run off in the woods and live like the Unabomber just in case something may ever happen. And I have kind of a similar point of view with chickens. I don't think that you have to give up the benefits of living in a city to kind of enjoy your own little slice of bucolic gardening, chicken raising, self-sufficiency in your own backyard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. And I think that's what kind of appealed to me about your show is I don't think the idea of survivalism and prepping and self-sufficiency has to be at odds with living in a city. And I think a lot of the shows out in your genre really put those as being mutually exclusive.
Mm-hmm. We get people on the forums sometimes that get on and they're like, you're going to die if you stay in the city. I'm like, why are you here? It's an urban survival podcast. Why are you even on? I mean, that's cool if you want to be here, but you can be the heckler. That's fine. We don't have an official heckler yet. We're taking applications. But
every village has to have one. So.
Yes, they do.
But I mean, it's kind of the same idea that you don't really have to compromise your lifestyle while you're pursuing being more self-sufficient and being more mindful about what you eat and what you raise and how you spend your free time. I don't think it has to be mutually exclusive that I've got to go live out in the woods or out in the country to do that. I think you can enjoy the city and still have chickens and still be mindful about prepping and gardening and all these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jen, what is the address and name of your podcast again?
Okay, so my podcast is called The Urban Chicken Podcast, and you can find it at www.urbanchickenpodcast.com.
Well, awesome. And I'm assuming you have a Facebook page and all that other fun stuff. Why am I saying assuming? I'm a fan of your Facebook page.
I do have a Twitter account. I have a Facebook account. I even have a Google Plus account. So, and I'm on those fairly regularly, and I try to share different chicken news stories that I think are interesting and worth a little peruse on all of those sites. So I am always posting stuff each and every day on all those different social media outlets.
Well, awesome. Well, Jen, I sure appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your chicken wisdom with us, and hopefully we'll have you back again soon.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been really a pleasure, coming on the show and talking chicken with you, and I appreciate you having me.
Good deal. Again, you can find Jen's show through her site at urbanchickenpodcast.com. Plus, links to the Urban Chicken Podcast Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter profiles will be in the show notes today. And of course, you can find those at intherabbithole.com. With that, we wrap up episode 121 from Houston, Texas. Till next time, stay safe and sound.